Welcome back to That Money Compass with me, Daddy. This is why I like following influencers sometimes because they just have news. Except this one is also a financial consultant. So I can get to learn or hoping to learn something out of the case. But this news was pretty big, I have to say, because people reposting and one of the group chats I was in talked about this in a pretty lengthy way as well. Disclaimer, I didn't really read the news, but from the discussion, I roughly get the context. And I was browsing as usual and chanced upon this post. So basically it's a post done by a financial consultant with a handle named Sweet Sorrows about this article whereby it is about lessons from a couple's dispute over their 16 properties. So basically this couple, I assume, is rich. They're going through divorce and it's basically got very complicated. So yeah, it's about this news where a couple, I assume is a rich couple, going through divorce and things got complicated because they have 16 properties. Like what? And they also have 6 digits credit card debts, if I'm not mistaken. And I mean, this is recalling from my memory on top of my head. And of course, the caption. Like, look at the caption. In order to split, like who gets which assets, they actually went down the hill, went down to the details who paid for what. Oh boy, I can just imagine how complicated that is. So I remember this one because before this post done by Sweet Sorrows, the group chat I was in, they basically talked about this in a pretty lengthy way, I have to say. Like the discussion went quite long. Some people were like, this is a huge red flag, like why they would have such a big credit card debt when the rate is definitely not low. We are talking about above 20%. I remember there was someone who actually went to a great length to compile how much they would charge you the interest rate basically for credit card debt, which is crazy, like above 20%. On top of that, 16 properties just show they are or maybe someone of that rich level, right? Because I always believe that people who have a lot of properties, they're just rich in general, you know? However, we have to remember that properties can be funded by debt. And that was exactly what Robert Kiyosaki was popular about. Alright, like basically he got popular because he keeps selling about these ideas of like buying properties funded with debt. He doesn't have to fork out a single cash or whatever, something like that. Alright, however, when I saw this point, there's one more thing that stood out to me. So let's read. Okay, so this post by Sweet Sorrows, a couple going through divorce, struggling to divide their massive property portfolio, which includes both local and overseas properties. Key takeaways. Okay, before we go through each point that the agent made, if I'm not mistaken, these overseas properties are referring to the UK properties. So yeah, key takeaways. There are 3 key takeaways basically. First one, always keep proper documentation. While we all hope our relationships will last forever, sometimes life may decide the other ways. So having clear records of who contributes to what isn't about expecting the worst, but it's about making sure everything stays fair and transparent for both partners. Okay, I have so many questions because first thing first, why? Okay, transparency for both partners. I mean, if the person is actually using their own money to pay for themselves, like why? Because naturally, if let's say you are using your own money to pay for the other half, doesn't the couple, like, don't they would already know what is spent in what? Like why do you need to document that, right? Because naturally it's already transparent in the first place, right? But fairness, this is the one that I would say people will always debate about. Because to be fair, if you document everything, then yeah, when this kind of thing happened, you can definitely refer to it easily. But of course, nobody wants that to happen. And I'll explain why people don't usually think about this in a marriage. Alright? Okay, secondly, don't put all your money in one basket. Despite owning multiple assets, the husband only had 2,000 Singapore dollars in his savings account and was carrying 130,000 Singapore dollars in credit card debts. This is the classic asset rich, cash poor situation. Well, I have to say this correct because it kind of reminded me of institutional banks whereby, you know, they have a lot of assets. Sometimes their cash is quite poor. Like if you look at their free cash flow, their free cash flow can be quite negative in a sense. But okay, alright. let's continue. I had a few chats recently with people saving up for property investments. While real estate can grow your wealth, it's not always a guaranteed win. It depends on market conditions. Now, it kind of tells me that she may not be very experienced in this, like in terms of her experience dealing with people having real estates and properties as their main assets. It's actually more than that. It's more than just market conditions. I will explain later as well. And then third paragraph, unlike stocks or robo-advisors, actually they are pretty the same, I guess. You can just sell a property overnight. Alright? If you need cash for emergencies, you might have to sell for loss. Okay? You are probably better off putting money in T-bills. Why? Like as in putting the $2,000 in T-bills or the whole assets in T-bills? Alright, third one. Overseas properties may not be the gold mine as you think it is. Yes, this is true. From personal experience, overseas property investments come with their challenges, different laws, market risks, and complexities of managing from afar. Okay, what seems like a great deal today might become a burden in the future. Okay, this is true as well. I've heard stories or read about stories where people thought it's a good deal, but I mean, I would say it's pretty common, I have to say, especially if you don't know what you're doing. Like they thought that it's a good deal, but turns out the people that's helping you to manage your properties in that country turns out to be a scam. Then yeah, your whole life will be flipped upside down basically. Okay, before we go through each point that the agent made, there's this news that bamboozled me. The husband only had 2,000 Singapore dollars in the savings account. This is a huge red flag. Like, I mean, I would also think so as well. I'm always a believer that no matter what you're gonna do with your money, one must have that safety line of the minimum amount of money they should have in the account. If you're rich, you wouldn't have just $2,000 sitting around. And if you are afraid that this idle money is not making money for you, which is understandable especially for people who are coming from like business background or something, you can always put it in like what she said, like T-bills, right? Because that makes sense, because it's safe. You can directly withdraw it out if you want to, and at the same time, while it's idling around, it still earn you some sort of money, even though the interest rate is not that high. But it's still much better than having just like $100 or $2,000 in your bank account. I mean, personally, for myself, $2,000 in an account is just not enough. Come on. And for a people whom I assume should have a pretty, I would say, rich lifestyle, $2,000 is definitely not enough to cover for even 1 month, I guess. So yeah, but if you ask me how much one should have, now that depends on your situation. Although there's this common secret that says 6 months worth of expenses, which according to me also depends on your situation, because if you have dived deeper, 6 months sometimes is just not enough. I mean, I have even heard from some agents where they just say that 3 months is actually enough. But there's also another situation where, do you save 6 months worth of expenses or 6 months worth of your income? Now this is another different case as well. So it really depends on your needs and your situation, to be honest. And now, going through the post, couple has both local and overseas properties. If I'm not wrong, they are UK properties. If I'm mistaken, do leave your comment down below, please, especially for those of you who actually read the article. So now, the key takeaways, my favorite. Alright, so just bear in mind, if I'm not mistaken, this person's switch story is not married whatsoever. So she may be looking at this more from like a job objective point of view. And why I said that is because the first point reminded me of that time when I was still single. So I was debating with a close friend of mine who was going to get married. We were debating about whether a couple should or should not make a joint account a mandatory thing. And for this first point about having a proper documentation, I would say it is not a so straightforward thing. Here's the thing. When one couple is getting married, it usually is a forever thing, right? Hence, people create a joint account, jewelries are shared, things are shared, a lot of things are shared. And then one start to not mind who paid what, etc. Right? I mean, that's just normal because both of you are one, basically. Yes, you can do a prenup or you can have like this non-written agreement among each other, which from legal point of view may not be so secure in a sense, right? But having debated with my religious friend, I see that it is not a black and white kind of thing. So having everything documented It just doesn't feel real. Can you imagine, like, you are married, you are supposed to be going through life together as one with your partner that is pretty much your other half, but you have to document everything as if it is like a legal business. Things become very objectified, right? Doesn't that sound that way? This is the perspective of a more human side of point of view, basically, rather than the logical side. But of course, for the logical side, documenting everything seemed like the right solution over here. So from here, we can see that consultants tend to be objective, which is fine, and sometimes this can help us to see into matters better, because when you are dealing with your own situation, you can be more emotional, which could cloud your judgment. But there are just some considerations where consultants should consider the client's emotional state and of course the ethical side as well. So that's for the first takeaway. Moving on to the second takeaway, it is about putting all in one basket. So I'm assuming that this is talking about the assets, like putting all your assets in one basket. There are things that I agree, but there's also a thing that I raised my eyebrow. So here's the thing. The couple is definitely big in properties, but the article may not have mentioned whether they have other assets like in financial market or other types of assets. It is not uncommon to also see people big in properties, because throughout my experience, I have spoken to people, especially older retired people who played properties back then, because in Singapore, flipping properties is a thing, right? You buy low, you sell high in the properties, and properties in Singapore just getting more and more expensive. And in the older days, it is easier for them to do so because properties were a lot cheaper back then. So what I meant by that is that they flip properties a lot, or they own multiple properties to collect rents for a stable stream of income and then perhaps sell when the time is right. Now, these are the two common things that properties owner usually do, other than, owning just one property, you stay inside and it's all the way, right? And then you downgrade or upgrade, it's up to you. But for people who have more than one properties, typically these are the two main reasons why they are doing so. Alright, so the part where she said it is not always a guaranteed win is true, because I've talked to a seasoned property flipper whereby he bought this property where he thought would be a hit, but turns out the demand is just not so high big that he just made a bit out of it. So he still made money out of it, if I'm not wrong, but it's not as much. It was a property in Sentosa. I remember this very vividly because the moment I heard it was a property in Sentosa, I remember I asked him, I was like, wait, I thought Sentosa properties are like a hit, especially towards foreigners, right? And he was like, nope, even though if it's in Sentosa, doesn't mean the property is good. And of course, only those people who understand properties really well would understand that, right? For me, I'm not a properties person, so yeah, I may not understand why. But then the part that I kind of cannot agree 100% was maybe like half of it only, was the last part where she mentioned how one should diversify assets. Now, generally, diversifying is alright. Yes, property cannot be liquidified easily as compared to selling stocks or shares. However, people who win big in properties, they typically don't do stock markets, and those that win big in stock markets, they don't do properties. This is what I noticed after talking to other people and why they don't really do big in the other side of the asset. The property people, they would say their luck is in properties, hence they do that. I have a few that said they tried financial markets but they lost big, so they just stay focused on the property side. So the same thing is true for the other side as well. Even for business owners, they also said the same thing, like they are better with entrepreneurship, building businesses, but not so in looking for business to invest. Like in terms of financial market, not like real physical business, or looking for great properties to invest in. So yeah, this is the point where from a consultant perspective, one shouldn't just jump the gun, and it really depends on a lot of factors. Yes, in general, diversifying can be good. For normal people, yes, that may be the best solution for you. But again, for this case, for this story, the red flag is the cash here. I mean, the husband only holds 2,000 Singapore dollars. We both know that this is just too little. Like in any kinds of emergencies, this is just too little. We both know that, you and me. So I think this could be the main issue here, not whether one should diversify or not. And of course, the credit card debts. Like, come on, we all know these are bad debts. And secondly, she mentioned how you are better off putting in T-bills. Like why? What's the reason behind T-bills, and why T-bills specifically when there are other government type of bonds? I mean, just why? Why not SSB? Why T-bills? Why T-bills like now? Okay, rates are always fluctuating, right? So if the T-bills rate is very low, should one still put inside? Okay, so there are a few reasons why people choose properties as assets, and on top of the 16 of them locally and overseas. Oh boy, you better dig deep and ask the person why, the big why, you know, not the small why but the big why. So this link to the last takeaway, right? Overseas properties may not always be a gold mine always. This is true. Buying properties just so that you can sell next time is not easy. A lot of factors have to be considered. If locally it already is hard, what about overseas? First thing first, you may not know the country well because you don't live there. You may not know the regulations well. You may not know what is considered a good property, like what factors come into play and stuff. There can be a lot of unknown factors here. So for people who made it big outside of Singapore, their skill is legit. So this last one, I have not much comment, but a good learning point. So what is the conclusion here? Again, regardless of which company the agents are from, they are pretty much taught the same fundamentals across. So it is in the advice on how and what that may differentiate the agents apart. So I hope that you enjoyed today's video. I hope you learned a thing or two here, and as usual, if you are looking for agents, do be more critical but also be kind to them. Anyway, thanks again for watching, especially if you watch up to this point. I really appreciate it. If you like this video, do consider leaving a like, as it will help this channel a lot. And if you have opinions, do leave them in the comments below. Stay hydrated, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye bye.